Welcome to the Now and Then podcast. I'm your host, Dan McCool. Join us as we dive into the fascinating journeys of professionals across the globe who have dedicated 15 or more years to their careers. Come along as we explore how their roles have evolved, the challenges they've faced, and the wisdom they've gained along the way. I can't wait for you to hear their insights. Let's uncover the stories behind the experiences of these remarkable professionals. Welcome to the Now and Then podcast. Welcome to part two of our interview today with John Bartholomew, my friend and nuclear power plant operator. Welcome back, John. The other thing is you did operate that plant through COVID. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So how did that impact the work out there? That must have been pretty interesting. Yeah.
It was. I don't want to come off as glib in any way because I know COVID was a terrible thing. Thousands of people, hundreds of thousands. I mean, 1 million people in our country, over 1 million lost their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Many more lost their jobs, their livelihoods. I was in a field producing electrical power that we obviously need. You need electricity to run the hospitals, the ventilators, the clinics,
Mm-hmm.
the toilet paper factories.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that you need power. So we were all considered critical infrastructure. So where some people were able to work from home, I was in the control room. I was a shift manager in the control room, so I had to go out to work, and our operating crew was out there.
Mm-hmm.
Now we spent, it's a 12-hour shift. We were masked up the entire time. We had big tubs of, the cleaning gel, alcohol solution. And the first thing I would do when I take the watch, I would wipe down the keyboard of the desk that I was, sitting at. I would wipe down the phone, where you touch it and put on your ear and speak into. We cleaned everything, cleaned the surfaces. So we cleaned everything between the operators, and we stayed in our masks the whole time. And this is the part where I don't want to give the wrong impression, because I was the senior person there. All the non-essential, or they were called non-essential. That doesn't mean they're not valuable. It just meant that there were people who did not need to be out physically at the plant to do their job. They could work remotely. They could work from home. Mm-hmm. And that included many of the senior executives and all of them. Good people. I had a good relationship with them, but it was kind of nice to be out there where there's nobody above me. I was. It was just me and my crew, and we were just doing our job, safely operating the plant. So it was kind of it was different. Again, COVID was a bad thing for me personally. For my job, it was not bad.
Huh. Well, that's that's really interesting. Did you encounter any issues with? I know it must have been nice not to have anybody looking over your shoulders with all the executives at home, But did you ever have an instance where you did have an essential person get COVID and could not come in, and were you able to, easily replace them or work without them?
Yeah, we had our protocols for dealing with a positive COVID test came directly from the state of Washington, because Energy Northwest is a joint operating agency with the state of Washington. So we have to follow the same rules that the state laid down. So everyone was instructed, and people were to, check their own temperature before coming out to work. And if they had any of the symptoms, to call in and describe it. So if, say, an individual, an operator, calls in and says, I have a fever, I have, some of these symptoms, then we had to do contact tracing. We had to see, okay, well, who else do they stand watch with? Who do they interact with? We probably should get tests for those people too. And then as far as covering that opening, because we have, again, for the Code of Federal Regulations and our technical specifications, there's a minimum crew complement that we must have, and we cannot operate the plant without that. So if a person, an operator, particularly a licensed operator, was unable to come, we would have to find coverage for them. We would have to call another individual out to cover that. To the best of my knowledge, we never had an instance where we either had to hold someone over for more than 2 additional hours or go without a required position.
Mm-hmm. Would that sometimes mean somebody having to work a double shift, or?
Well, you can't do that. One of the things, Energy Northwest always had a policy for hours worked, and there's maximum hours you're allowed to work. That's always been in effect. I wish I could remember exactly when. Several years ago, the NRC came up with a rule called the fatigue rule, which I think is a good idea. It's similar to, over-the-road truckers and things that are performing a job that could put people at risk if they're fatigued. So we have strict rules. A person can hold over for 2 hours at the most after a 12-hour shift, required to have 10 hours off between shifts, and there's a maximum you can work 16 hours in a 24-hour day, but you have to stay within those other rules, and up to a maximum of 72 hours in a 7-day period. And if for some reason those cannot be met, then there is a waiver process that we would have to go through to allow somebody to work excess hours. That was not required to be done anytime during COVID. There's as you might imagine, everything with nuclear power, there is a procedure and a policy and a rule for everything. And most of those rules come about from things that have come up in the past, where that's a big part of the whole industry is when things go wrong, we go back and do a root cause analysis. Why did it go wrong? And what can we learn? And what policies, procedures can we put in place to prevent those same things from causing something to go wrong again?
Right. Well, it's good to know that those protocols are in place. I kind of suspected they were with the involvement of the DOE so intense.
Well, one thing I want to clarify, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is a congressionally chartered commission. It is under the Department of Energy, but there was virtually no overlap between Department of Energy and our nuclear power plant. The plant is located on the U.S. Hanford site, on the Department of Energy Hanford site. The land is leased, I think, from the DOE, but that's it. We didn't ever really interact with the DOE. We have very similar rules, similar policies, because the Hanford site is not operating any nuclear plants currently, but they do have nuclear technology. There's nuclear contamination and radiation. They have to follow a lot of the same kind of things. But yeah, we did not work with or necessarily take direction from the Department of Energy. If there was a type of event, we kept each other apprised of what was going on. If something happened at Hanford, their operations center would contact us to let us know what was happening. If we had something happening at our plant, we would contact them. But that was pretty much the extent of overlap.
Yeah, well, thanks for clarifying that, John, because I didn't really realize that the DOE didn't have much authority at that's the NRC that has most of the authority at the plant out there.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. I appreciate it. One thing I want to go back a little bit when you talked about burning bridges or not wanting to burn bridges. In case you wanted to go back, a saying popped into my mind, but then I forgot about it as we continued our discussion. Whenever I hear about burning bridges, there was a person who told me, yeah, the only bridge I want to burn is the one behind me, lighting the way forward. So every now and then you might want to burn a bridge, but I just wanted to make that comment there.
I had not heard that before. That's an interesting thought.
Yeah. It won't work in every circumstance, but every now and then, Okay, so moving right along here, I'd like to ask next, what advice would you give someone who's starting out in the nuclear industry today based on your experiences?
Well, there's a lot more options you know, many of the operators I worked with were ex-Navy guys, just like me, and women. There are of course many women that now, because the nuclear field is open to them, they do that. I say guys in a you know, trying not to be a certain, male or female. People in
Right.
nuclear power
Okay.
have a lot of options now. They can come through the Navy program, which worked for many of us. But there's also, I'd like to put a little plug in for a program that Energy Northwest has entered into a few years ago with Columbia Basin College. And they have nuclear technology programs at CBC where a person can get into health physics, which is basically radiation protection, because certain places in the plant, by virtue of being a nuclear power plant, have radiation above certain levels or possibly contamination where people still have to work. And the HP techs, the RP, radiation protection, those folks make that all possible. They're experts in radiation protection, contamination control, the types of protective equipment that a person would use to do that work safely. And a person can go through CBC and become a health physics technician, and they could get a job either at the Hanford site in DOE-related stuff or at our power plant. They can also get into the operator training. I was a senior reactor operator licensed by the NRC. There are also reactor operators who are licensed by the NRC. Then there are the non-licensed operators that we call equipment operators. And they are the ones that go out in the operating spaces. They take readings on equipment, monitor it. They perform activities like the processing water. Most of the water that we use is reprocessed water that's come from various things. There's always going to be a certain amount of leakage of valve packing, pump packing, sumps that pump down, that type of thing. We take that water, we reprocess it, and we use it back in the plant. We have not discharged any water that's been used in the reactor plant. We have the ability, and we are licensed to do so, but the Columbia Generating Station has not released any water that's been used in the plant to the environment for decades now.
Wow.
We reuse all of it. So that's the kind of thing that the non-licensed operators do. And a person can go through CBC and get some classroom training and that type of thing, and get into become a non-licensed operator, an equipment operator at our plant. And I can tell you people I know who started like that, and they ended up as shift managers, plant managers. It's a very upwardly mobile environment that a person doesn't even necessarily need a college degree for to do well. So there's a lot of ways to do it. There are some certain requirements. You've got to be a straight shooter. You can't use even legal recreational drugs, alcohol, right? You're not required to not drink, but if you come to work with a blood alcohol content, there will be consequences. The company would give a person usually one or two chances, and then they're gone. Now, with something like marijuana, which is legal in the state of Washington, but it is federally not legal, and since the NRC is a federally chartered commission, no one can use recreational marijuana and work at the power plant. So there's a couple things. If a person would seek a career in this, there's certain things that you need to be aware of that could impact your life depending on what's important to you. But again, get the if you're in high school or something, it's a STEM type of job. Get into the sciences, chemistry, physics, math. The math, of course, because it's a tool that's necessary to do other things. It's not really math just for its own sake. And then again, engineering. There's a lot of things. We have environmental scientists at the plant. We've got trainers. We have a big training department. So if a person is interested in doing technical training, so there's so many opportunities. There are periodic career fairs. I would say contact Energy Northwest or contact maybe WSU or CDC. But you've got to be willing to learn, willing to be self-critical, and know what you're getting into. But the most important advice I would give any young person is don't feel like what you choose to do this week, this month, this year is going to be a lifelong thing, right? That really freaked me out when I was a kid. That, all right, you got to pick what you're going to do for the rest of your life. No, you don't. Pick something, give it a try, see if you like it. And if you don't, well, you can try something else, but you'll be better off for the experience of having tried, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I agree totally. Most people these days, we're not living in the 50s anymore where people lock into a career and that's it for the next 40 years. I've had 2 or 3 different careers, and almost everybody I know has had two or at least 2 careers.
Right.
And that's not a bad thing. You learn, like you say, and then you bring those skills to the next career. Hopefully you can advance even further and even quicker based on your past experience.
Right.
Yeah. One thing I did want to ask you about entering the field. I know a lot of the work at Hanford is they have internships. So is internships and also a possibility out there at the plant, or how does that factor in?
Yeah, it absolutely is. We have it's called WBL, work-based learning, and students from high schools, community college come out and work. In fact, and again, it's in all the fields. There's an occupational health department out there. Deal with things, as you might imagine, first aid issues if they come up, but also the medical side of qualifications. Right? I had to be, this beard is a post-retirement thing because I had to be clean shaven the whole time I was out there because I might need to wear a respirator. And so if you're going to wear a respirator, you have to be medically qualified. So there is a staff of people that do they do testing, to make sure you're physically able to do the work you need to do. Also, other requirements, you get tested for hearing. I was tested every year to see if my hearing was degrading because it's a noisy environment in a power plant. You've got turbines, you've got steam piping, you've got pumps. They do vision testing. So what I'm getting at with that is they had a work-based learning student in the occupational health department, and that young man is on his way to nursing school now. So don't think it's all just nuclear. It's an industrial facility that requires all kinds of disciplines. But yeah, absolutely. There's work-based learning. There's internships. We have engineers working there now who started out as interns.
Wow. Well, that's good to know that there's so many opportunities and so many different paths to get into it. One thing that I'm curious about as well is, where do you see the profession heading? I see recently where they have developed what do they call it? It's a mini self-contained power plant. I'm really curious about that and where you see the nuclear industry heading.
Okay, great. Yeah, what you're talking about there is what's known as small modular reactors, SMRs. And my former company, Energy Northwest, is teamed with 2 or 3 organizations that are working on that very thing. There's a company, NewScale, based out of Corvallis, Oregon, that has an office in Richland. There's TerraPower, which I think, all right, one of your astute alert podcast listeners will probably correct me, but one of them is backed by Bill Gates. Yeah, as we know, Microsoft is investing in getting 3 Mile Island going again to power servers and AI. They're also looking at small modular reactors for that very thing. It's funny because a nuclear submarine is a small modular reactor. You go to sea,
right,
and you have enough power for the propulsion to move the boat through the water, but you also are making your own electrical power. You're also using that power to make your own water, to distill salt water into fresh water. And so really a Navy plant is a small mobile modular reactor. So the small modular reactor technology is The plant I worked at was about 1,200 megawatts electric. That's enough to light up Seattle. A
Mm-hmm.
small modular reactor, individual reactor, might be 40, 60, maybe 80 megawatts. But the idea is that they could be scaled, put them together. You might have a site with many of these reactors, and they may put a total output out of, like, say, 1,200 megawatts. So that's a technology that's being developed. There are the new generation of plants. There were two built in Georgia at the Bodle site, 3 and 4. One of them is operating now, and that I don't recall the type of reactor they are, but everything gets better. Just like the cars that we drive today are more reliable, get better mileage, and everything than the cars we drove as kids growing up. Although the reactors that they designed and built in the 70s and 80s, the new ones being built today require less power for their support systems. They, most importantly, are what are called passively safe. That is, they don't need AC power supply after the unit trips off to keep the core cool, to keep it covered. So the new plants, definitely new plant construction. We're going to see some of that. We may not see the big 1,000 megawatt plants anymore. It might be these small modular ones. We talked earlier at the beginning about plants that didn't get completed or plants that have been shut down that are getting restarted. And we talked about the license renewal, where a lot of the plants that are approaching or have even passed their original end of license have gone through a license renewal. So I see there's still a future. It's funny, when I was in college, when I was still running away from nuclear power, I had a professor in the mechanical engineering department who used to be in the nuclear engineering department, which they no longer had at the University of Washington. And he said, yeah, it's gone. My father, who was a nuclear engineer, said, yeah, nuclear power, dead in the water. Well, it's not, right? There aren't as many plants as there used to be operating in the United States. But the industry is still moving forward. We're always going to need electricity. That's not going to go away. My personal feeling is nuclear power will not likely be the one and only solution, but I think it's a big part of the solution. We can use it in conjunction with hydro, with solar, with wind. It's going to be part of it. I do feel that people starting today in the nuclear industry could enjoy a long career like I had. If you count my time in the Navy and my time at the power plant and the time I did in DOE work, I mean, it's over 40 years that I was able to work in the nuclear field.
Yeah, I find that fascinating. How high tech and the bigger companies that require a lot of power, like Google, Microsoft, Facebook, all those guys they seem to be pretty interested in reviving some nuclear power because those facilities require huge amounts of power and water for cooling. Right. I used to work for a company that did insulation for those plants, the big server plants up in Moses Lake and stuff. So, that's a big deal. One thing I did want to ask you about these mini plants. Do you ever think that smaller metropolitan areas, like perhaps the Tri-Cities or say Spokane, would get on board with having one of those small plants just to power their city?
Well, that gets into a lot more than just technology, right? My field has always kind of been the technical side of things. I'm not qualified to give firm answers on, say, the political and the environmental and societal issues that this would bring up.
Sure.
I think it's something that could be done right now. In New York, there's 9 Mile units 1 and 2 and Fitzpatrick that are up there in the Lake Ontario region, kind of upstate. But there's also Indian Point, which is not far at all from New York City. So there are plants that are fairly close proximity to population centers. I think some of the other issues to be concerned with are the security needs.
Oh, right? Yeah.
Because Now, spent nuclear fuel kind of takes care of itself. I've been told, I've never tried this, but if you took a used, new nuclear fuel, brand new, unused nuclear fuel, you can touch it. They don't. You have to wear white gloves because the oils from your skin and stuff could cause some damage to the cladding, but it's not a hazard to a person. Used nuclear fuel that's been irradiated. There's activated components in there that if you were to put it on the 50-yard line of a football field, and because everything in the U.S. is in terms of football fields, right? If you put one on a 50-yard line of a football field and ran towards it from the goal line, you'd never reach it, right? If there were no. So, yeah, there's a big concern ever since 9/11, which is a big change in the industry about security. We've always had security at nuclear plants. There's always been a recognition that you have to keep the plant safe, you have to keep the people safe. And now, of course, since 9/11, the potential for terrorism, that kind of thing is looked at. So that's another piece you'd have to look at. If you're going to put a plant in a town, not only do you have to site the plant, you're going to have to store the fuel when it's used because personally, this is my personal opinion. This is not based on any inside information. I don't think there will ever be a national spent nuclear fuel repository, like, say, a Yucca Mountain. I don't think that's going to happen because you'd have to be able to transport that dangerous used fuel across multiple state lines to get it to this repository. And I just don't think politically and environmentally that's going to happen. It could be done. That was one of my dad's projects when he worked at Los Alamos, was those rail cars that were designed to withstand like missile blasts.
Right.
It could be done safely. The technology, it all can be done, but you have to look at the people too. Why force things on people that they just don't want, that they're not comfortable with?
Right. And they're already getting some pushback about just in the state of Washington, crossing the state with rail cars with nuclear waste, the stuff that they're starting to process at the VIT plant. It's already a controversy. So yeah, I see your point there. And I guess even though it's technologically feasible, there are so many other factors that it sounds like it's probably going to be prohibitive, and that's understandable as well. There's so many factors involved. Yeah.
Yep.
So we'll go ahead and wrap this up, John. And one final question I'd like to know is, I think I probably know the answer to this already, but if you had it to do all over again, would you?
Yes, I would. I might do things a little different, but I have to say that we all have our own different needs as far as, well, how much do I need to get paid? Where do I want to live? What kind of work do I want to do? And for me, nuclear power was a rewarding career. It was challenging. It was difficult, but I also felt like I was doing something valuable. I wasn't just pushing paper around. I was making electricity to make people's lives better. Particularly we talked about COVID. That's when I really started thinking about it. We're powering schools. We're powering hospitals. We're powering, homes. So yeah, it met the needs I had to feed my family, to have reliable work, and to be able to feel like I was doing something worthwhile. One thing I might have done a little different, looking in retrospect, I don't regret having gone to college. I enjoyed going to college, getting a mechanical engineering degree, and working as an engineer for like 12 years. But if I would have just gone straight to the power plant when I got out of the Navy in 1990, I would have had like 7 more years of service. So instead of 26 years out there, I'd have 33. And if I retired when I did, and I'd have a bigger pension. But that's just a personal thing. I would definitely. If I knew how things would end up, I would have done things a little different. But overall, I'm happy and glad that I was given the opportunity to do this. And it's not for everyone, but it was a good thing for me.
Well, good. And they always say hindsight's 20/20. We never do things exactly the same. That's been my experience, at least. Well, that's good to hear, John, that that you were happy with your career and you do it again. You know, not everybody is as blessed as that to find something that they like doing and then follow through and have it be a rewarding career for all those years. And it sounds like it was rewarding.
Yes, it was.
So congratulations on that. I'd like to thank you, John, for being my guest today on the Now and Then podcast. We've gotten a lot of really good insights from you. Thanks again, and happy retirement. Have fun camping and playing bluegrass, buddy.
All right. Thanks a lot, Dan.
You're welcome.
My pleasure.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Now and Then podcast. If so, then subscribe, like, follow, throw money, do whatever it is that you do to show support. We really appreciate it. Stay curious and carpe diem.